CADIIF is pleased to welcome you to this platform for its first webinar devoted to shedding new light on the slave trade in Cameroon. So how can the descendants of Cameroonians who left for the United States 400 years ago can return? How to organize their return, predict it, plan it, succeed? So CADIIF is an entity which has set itself the objective to bringing together all those who carry the DNA of Cameroon in them around the vast vision of the return. So thank you to all of you who have connected from afar to take part in this event, which is part of a larger vision. Without wasting any more time, we have the honor to receive here Professor Ahmadou Sehou. Welcome, Professor Ahmadou Sehou. He is an author, a full professor and researcher in political and social history of Cameroonian nationality. His work focuses on the history of slavery, the slave trade, and their memories in African, Atlantic, and Islamic context. He is a member of the African Center for Research on Slavery and Slave Trade, and founder of the Center for Multidisciplinary Studies and Research on Slavery and the Slave Trade in Africa. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you for your presentation, Erika, and good afternoon to everybody. Thank you. We are welcome.
Thank you, Professor. So after that presentation, we are waiting for weeks to hear from you about that history of the slave trade that took place in Cameroon. So what is the new light that you can give us to know more about that part of our history?
Yeah, I have to share my screen with the participants, so it could be more easier for me to explain and also to show some pictures, some text to the participants. So I think it will be of help for better understanding of the topic and all what is needed to be understood about my presentation. So if you can allow me to share my screen, I will do so.
Yes, you can.
Okay, I think everyone is seeing. Is it visible to everyone? Okay, so my presentation is entitled "The Slave Trade in Cameroon, the Production and the Challenges of a Worldwide Diaspora." the guidelines of what I will share with you. I have a very brief introduction. I will present the situation before the slave trade, the Atlantic system, the trans-Saharan routes, a few words about resistance, abolitions, and challenging questions, and then conclusion. First of all, to start, I would like to present, for those who don't know Cameroon, his geographical location in Africa. You have the map of Africa, and you have Cameroon from the Atlantic Ocean to the Lake Chad. This geographical extension is the basis of its diversity, its ethnical diversity, cultural diversity, economic diversity. So it's why it is said Cameroon is a summary of all Africa. You have neighboring countries like Chad, Nigeria, Central African Republic, Congo, Gabon, and Equatorial Guinea. All this space was integrated while tackling with the question of slavery, because you know that all frontiers, all those frontiers are colonial frontiers. And before colonization, before this era, we have a very wide space, very open space, where peoples are living and traveling to and fro. To introduce my presentation, I want to make brief understanding of some words we use every day while talking about slavery. And what is a slave? I took 4 points to explain what is a slave. The otherness, so the alterity, the difference with other. The property, a slave owned to a master. The hereditary, transmissible stigma to its descendants. And you get out, you exit from slavery by manumation, affranchisement, if it is accepted in English. So slavery will be the system, very articulated, many steps, many actors, many techniques. And slave trade then means exchange, acquisition of slaves, sale, purchase, gift, inheritance. So the commercial aspect. So the slave trade is just a step, is just an aspect of the whole system we will consider as slavery. And it can help us to understand what have been abolished. Is it slavery? Is it slave trade? And in some areas, it is not the same. What is the situation before the beginning of the system? If you take the case of Cameroon, we have two big parts: the coastal area, or the southern parts of Cameroon, and the northern parts. And all these two parts participated in slavery and slave trade. Where in the coastal area, we are integrated to the transatlantic system. And in the northern part of Cameroon, you have the trans-Saharan system, which will push in the eastwards of the Sokoto Empire, which include all the northern parts of Cameroon and a very big part of the central Cameroon. So the originality of Cameroon, you ask Erika, is to Cameroon have participated to all those systems, Atlantic system and the Saharan system too. And what can be put out also is that there is no evidence of slavery or slave markets in that space, which became Cameroon later, before the introducing of Islam from the north or colonial presence in the south, in the coastal areas. If you look around all societies in Cameroon, you cannot find slave markets before this era. It is a very important point to note. We can discuss it later. The Atlantic system began from 1472 in the coastal area of Cameroon by the coming of the Portuguese. The trade started from the coastal areas to the islands in the neighborhoods. So it has not started by going across the Atlantic, but from the coastal areas to the islands we have. So the system is growing, developing years after years to become a very wide system. So we are in a logic of a construction of a system, a process of connection and involvement of the populations of the coastal area, and progressively to the interior. And also, we assist to a progressive transformation of previous practices, like abducting of wives, we have shown before. So this map drawn by David Eltis show the link between this coastal area of Cameroon to various directions to the Americas. You have North America, you have Central America with the Caribbeans, you have Brazil, and all those points. And the importance of this map is that David Eltis and his team have traced the voyages that are organized, the travels between the coastal areas of Cameroon to through the Atlantic and to all those directions, destinations. And he gave some numbers. It is documented, it is known. But you know also that it is just indications, because it is difficult and impossible to have the real numbers. So also another undergoing work by Lisa Aubrey identifies some ships, 25 to Grenada, 18 to Sierra Leone, 16 to Dominica, 16 to Barbados, 14 to Jamaica, 6 to Martinique, 6 to Saint Vincent, 4 to Cuba, 4 to St. Kitts, and 4 to Antigua. But it is an ongoing work, because the question is not studied at large as in other parts of Africa or the world. If we come back to the coastal areas of Cameroon, we have the main points, the main exit ports. The big one, the bigger, is Calabar. Calabar is now in Nigeria. You have the second in importance, the Vuri River in Douala now, but Douala did not exist at that time. You have those settlements around the Vuri River, the second point. Bimbia has the third point, considering the situation is in Cameroon. And you can go south to Dizange and the Sanaga. You can go to Great Batanga in nowadays Kribi. You can go till Campo at the neighborhoods of the Equatorial Guinea in the south. So you have those various exit points which are related to the collective points, like Fernando Po, which is now a oceanic part of Equatorial Guinea. You have those islands like Sao Tome and Principe. So it is an integrated system which works from the coastal area, the interior, and then to the whole system through the Atlantic. Also, we have the very known site of Bimbia. And as I said, Bimbia is not the most important. Now in Cameroon territory, it is the second in importance in the coastal area, but it is not the biggest. And you have a look of Bimbia, you can have better and more pictures online, which can show you. And you have those ruins, and you have this rock, and you have Nickel Island at large. So you have just a little view. To summarize all the sites in the coastal area of Cameroon, you have all those sites integrated to Nigeria with Calabar, to Equatorial Guinea, to Fernando Po Island, which is better now. You have Sao Tome. So you have a system where with importance indicated in this view. Further, in the northern parts, we have the trans-Saharan routes prolonged from the Mediterranean across the Sahara, the Sudano-Sahelian zone and part of Africa, then in the Sokoto Empire. And when this map was drawn, the system is not wholly completed. You see those indications. So he is growing for southeast in what is known today as Cameroon. And you have the links, the routes from Cameroon through Kuka, through Bauchi, Zaria, Kano, and then you cross the Sahara to go to Tunis, to go to Libya. You have Tripoli, you have Benghazi, and also to cross the Mediterranean for the Middle East. So a very great and renowned prince of Logon Birni, Abraham Hannibal, was kept and brought till Russia. And you can read a lot of about him online. The major routes, major products, you have them in this presentation. The route of the north, the route of the south, and so on. So, and some indications about the security of those routes, their importance, the goods for imports and for exports in these routes, for the trans-Saharan slave trade routes linked to Cameroon space. What about resistance? What we have to know is that peoples have not accepted slavery or slave trade. They have fought against it from the beginning till the end. But if you look at the readings or the writings about slavery, this dimension is very, very, very poorly studied. So the act of resistance marked all the way of slavery. And when it comes to abolition, what was abolished specifically in the Cameroon territory and for many African territories by colonizers is slave trade. The late slavery continues. Those who are already slaves, they continue to keep this status. And nowadays you can find the descendant of slaves in Cameroon territory, in the northern parts, and also in the grassfield region areas of Cameroon. So there is a form of accommodation by colonizers to that system. After abolition by British, by the other countries, other powers, you have the continuum of the system in the Cameroonian territories for decades. Also, the system of dependencies we are experiencing now have roots in that period. Have some habits, consumption, wars, conflicts, intertribal wars. You have arms which have been introduced by traders, by slave traders, to make more slaves, and it leads to conflicts and wars in the territory and between peoples. Also, this picture is a slavery-related architecture developed by the Musgum in the northern parts of Cameroon to resist to fire, and also to resist to the raiders. So today it is part of the culture and part of the architecture. You can see it if you visit those areas. I want to raise also some challenging questions while talking to slavery and diaspora. Who are those Africans taken off by the slave trade, by the colonial migrations? Because the diaspora is not only that's of slave trade. After slave trade, you have many vagues of diaspora continue. So who are those Africans taken off from Africa? They are the best ones. They are young, because they are not taking old people, sick people, children or babies. So they choose the best of Africans to take off, to bring abroad. They choose those who have some knowledge, technical knowledge. You have blacksmiths, you have craftsmen, you have architects, you have farmers, you have doctors, you have princes. So those who master the rules of the society, those who are destined to rule, they capture them and they brought them abroad. Why countries like Japan, like China, like India have developed or are developing? Because of their diaspora. If you go back to the Japan history from 1868, l'ère Meiji, the Meiji era, they send Japanese abroad, and the Japanese abroad came back with what makes a Western civilization, what makes Westerners powerful than other people. And it is the beginning of the development of Japan. What makes China develop? It is all the support brought by its diaspora. It is the case with India, and I think it will be the case for Africa too, if the African diaspora is conscious of that aspect and make it together. What's the image we have of Africa today? Poverty, hunger, diseases, conflicts, wars, refugees. But we didn't ask ourselves why the persistence of those problems. We have the roots of those problems in that past of slavery, slave trade, and all what it have been taken off from the continent. And it is continuing. It have not stopped by colonization. Independence have transformed itself as dependence of Africa to the rest of the world. You see all those summits, Europe, Africa, Turkey, Africa, India, Africa, China, Africa. So every power, every country, every region which want to develop, establish and reinforce his links to Africa. Why? Because of the resources. Africa is the richest continent in the world. Africa have all what is needed to its development. But why Africa is not developed? Because its forces taken out, resources taken out and continue to be taken out. So what we develop in Africa, only poverty, the development of poverty. It is when you see a map of Africa, a map of the world, you cannot realize that in Africa you can have USA, China, India, Europe. You can have all those parts of the world inside Africa. Inside Africa. But when you see the map of the world, they present Africa very smallest at the middle, and you have Europe at the top of Africa, and you have the other wings represented by Asia and America. So if we, in our imaginary, we see Africa very small, what is not the case? So we have to reverse that vision, and it can impact our minds, our mindset, and also determine our behavior towards others and to have our own continent. We have the biggest continent, but we don't know it, and we are reduced to a margin of the world. The responsibility of the African diaspora is very huge in that process. Look, challenging question I ask the diaspora: how do you feel where you are now? All the problems you are facing, differences, racism, discrimination, all kinds of limitations. Why? Because of your color. The only element in which they base all those limitations is color. And they define that black is a color, yellow is a color, but white is not a color. White is not a color. When they talk about color people, it is about others, never whites. But I have asked this question in a conference in France with many scholars. Why is white a color? And I didn't get any answer about it. So they color others to dominate, to discriminate. So you will never be at home out of Africa. For all Black peoples, out of Africa, you are never at home. You can be born, you can be born in Europe, in America, in Asia. They will show you at any time, any day, every time that you are not part of that area. So you are naturally, you are pushed to go back to Africa. So you are part of Africa. You have to rebuild those links. You are taken from Africa, so you have to be back to Africa, naturally. Yes, you can say that it is easy to say it, but how to do it? What are the reasons to come back to Africa? When we question history, we have many reasons. You have that the political idea of Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism took birth in the diaspora. The idea was developed in the diaspora. The first Black state to be independent is Haiti. And from the example of Haiti, Africans dream to be independent too after. And many Africans of the diaspora have developed the idea of Pan-Africanism, the idea of return to Africa. Second idea is the quest for identity and origins. When you are from a slave descendant in America or in Asia, in Europe, you face this question: who am I? Who are you? What are your roots? You cannot have answer there in Europe, in America, or in Asia. Your roots are in Africa. It's what links you to your ancestors. It's what can help you to have the answer to the question: who are you? Your name, the names given in America, in Asia, in Europe to Africa or African descent, those names, what are their importance? What are their significance? You have to go to Africa to have your origins and also your names. And naming is the first element of identity. When you have a baby, the first thing you think about is to give him a name. How am I going to call him? And it determines the rest. So the quest of human dignity, also psychological security for a Black descendant, it is nowhere till Africa. In Africa, you feel at home. In Africa, you feel very calm psychologically and so on. But for Africans or for African descendants in the other parts of the world, every day they make you know that you are not where you are supposed to be. And it is the question: you are born in America, you are born in Europe, you are born in Asia, but they never consider you as European, as American. The same, an African who traveled to America, he is Black. African American is Black. They consider you as the same. You face the same difficulties because of your Blackness, because of your origin too. So another reason for reconnecting is to link yourself to that African heritage, to rediscover some cultural elements that you have lost on the way, and to express their pride of being Black. In Africa, being Black is not a problem, but abroad, it is a problem. It is the problem. So, a last picture about this topic is that French footballer who went back to Cameroon last January. He traced his DNA and revealed he's a Douala from Djebale. And he was received by the Ngondo in the Douala Cultural Center and annoblished and given a title, a title of nobility at in Douala. He was received also by the mayor of the city of Douala, who made him a citizen of Douala. So he was welcomed very warmly, and you can find many pictures expressing very emotional. So it is the way. And to conclude briefly, I could say that the slave trade have been a major turning point in the evolution of the African continent and its societies. Most habits acquired at this time are continuing today. Disorganization, militarization, predation, domination, extraversion, dependence, continuous impoverishment. From the slavery area till now, we are continuing to export raw materials. First, the force, our force. Now it is our knowledge and our raw materials. Economically, it is said that the industry have to go where you can find raw materials. But it is not work with Africa. For our cacao, for our cocoa, we have to go to Europe to have good chocolate. For our coffee, we have to go to Europe to have great coffee. For our banana, we have to export to others. We don't eat the best ones. For our iron, for our wood. So, and it is the base of our economy. Our states are based on the export of raw materials, never transform, and they do all to not make it possible to transform all those raw materials. And by exporting raw materials, we are exporting our jobs. We are exporting our developments. A cocoa farmer can produce tons and tons of cocoa every year. He will become poorer and poorer. Why? Because when he raises his production, they slow the price of cocoa. So he produces more, but he becomes impoverished, more poor. So it is the link, and those links are based on this past we have experienced in the slave era. And it is not changed, it has not changed till today. We are continuing in that process. So what we are expecting for those who are tracing the DNA is not simply to come to Africa, but to understand that it is their home, their homeland. They can never be or express a well-being outside Africa. Thank you for your attention, and we can pursue on the discussions. I can give more details if needed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. Professor Ahmadou Sehou pretty much wrapped up the topic on his own. He pretty said it all. Thank you, Professor, for this rich and moving teaching. Again, I call it teaching because I learned a lot from your presentation, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. I already have a lot of questions to ask, especially on the reason for the difficulty of access to all this information and the history for the general public. But I think that we'll come back to it later. What I also learned, and which is very important, is that the development of nations, of any nation, goes through its diaspora. So I want us to keep this in mind for later. In the meantime, you can already ask your questions in the chat. They will be sent to the panelists. The time for me to introduce our next speaker, Mrs. Ada Anagho-Brown. She is a native of Cameroon, and her family moved to the United States in 1975. Over the years, she has dedicated her life to promoting Africa. And for the past 5 years, she has organized trips to Cameroon, Benin, Nigeria, with African Americans who trace their DNA to those countries. In 2012, she launched Roots to Glory Tours. Roots to Glory Tours is a company dedicated to bridging the gap between the United States and Africa. And that's the transition between the history and nowadays. Mrs. Ada, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Before we move on, can somebody please remove that person, Ms. Jackson, whoever they are?
It is already done.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
My name is Ada, and when I'm in Cameroon, I call myself Ada. When I'm in Africa, I call myself Ada. Because when I came here in 75, my name was Ada, but it was changed to Ada. Now it's back to Ada, right? So, it's so wonderful to see some of you on the call. I haven't seen you in a long time. Welcome, welcome to this presentation. I'm not sure what I can say different than what I've said in the past, but I'm glad to be here with you all. As you know, I started this mission because I felt like we needed to sort of come together in a way that we normally don't. Towards to Cameroon, it was a very important part of who I was, who I am, to try to promote Africa, but also try to promote Cameroon, where I come from. It was very important for me to get people talking about where they come from. The professor eloquently said about your origins. You cannot deny your origins. Your ancestors came from, if you have a drop of Black in you, your ancestors came from the continent. So it's important to acknowledge that, and it's important to feel proud about that. And I think that most of the people on this call are very much in that same mindset, that they're proud of where they come from. Being proud of where you come from and finding your DNA and understanding what country you come from also comes with responsibility to understand what your ancestors, their voyage was. It's important to note that we here in the diaspora, we get comfortable, we think about things in a different way than Africans do, right? So it's important for me to better equip people here who've traced their DNA and found that they're Cameroonians to better understand Africans. Like, for instance, something as simple as time management. We call it Black people time. In Cameroon, we don't call it anything because we know we're going to be late. So we just say time, so you say 8 o'clock, we understand 9 o'clock. Here, color people time, I don't know if 8 o'clock is 8 o'clock or 8:30, but it just the nuances of your ancestry. When we started this journey of doing ancestry and helping people who've done their DNA go back home, we found that when there are more people doing their DNA from this side, so I would say diaspora members, people whose descendants or ancestors were enslaved, there is a different feeling when they do their DNA than before they do their DNA. So we often talk about Africans and how they react to Africans in America, for instance, who most don't know who they come from. A lot of them don't care where they come from. There's a different dynamics with Africans and African Americans who don't know where they come from than there is with Africans and African Americans who know where they come from. Because there is a common thread that you want to know. You acknowledge that your DNA is from somewhere else, and you acknowledge that it's, might be from Africa. But when you find out that you're Cameroonian and you meet a Cameroonian in the street, or you meet a Cameroonian at work or whatever, something happens that is so special that you cannot explain, because the Cameroonian automatically feels like they have to protect you. Now you're one of them. So it's like, I've done my DNA. I find out I'm Cameroonian. There's a coworker in my office that's Cameroonian. Wait, what? Come to my house. We're going to cook you some soup. We're going to introduce you to this. We have uncles and aunties and all these people that you can meet. Then it becomes, we are now part of this family. And I believe that once you become part of the family together, there's so many things that you can do. Sometimes Africans on the continent look at Americans as, and I'm not talking just African Americans, I'm talking about people in the diaspora. They often look at people in the diaspora as somebody that's going to come to Africa to help develop it, help save it, help, so many things. But what we have to look at is that, consider this, those slave traders that brought the Africans to the shores of America considered those enslaved Africans their workforce. They actually think the same way that Africans think about the reverse. Their thought was, we are going to get these Africans and they're going to develop our nations. They're going to build our homes, build our structures, build our roads. They're going to feed our people. They're going to take care of our children. So when you start looking back as Africans, you're looking at Africans in the diaspora doing the same thing. What's really the difference? So what we have to do as first generation Africans, continental Africans, we have to look at it in terms of, we are here as a people. We want our descendants of our ancestors who are in the diaspora to come back to be with us first. The most important thing that we need to make sure is that they come back to be with us first. Because when you understand it that way, you understand that as a family, you can do anything. But when you understand it as, well, they're going to come and they're going to develop, well, that's not right. Why should they, whose ancestors have worked on the plantations that you and me cannot understand, and I'm talking continental Africans, we cannot understand the journey that their ancestors made through those plantations and all those beatings and all those rapes and all those farms, that some of them were breeding farms. We can't understand that journey. So therefore, we cannot expect them to understand our journey, which is, leaving, having our families lost, not knowing where our families were, because our families left. Their families survived. Our families left. Our families had to survive. We had to survive our families not being with us. Imagine, as the professor eloquently said, they're taking the best of us. If they're taking the best of us, who's left? Grandma, who can barely do anything. Auntie, who's got one leg. We've got small cousins who are 2, 3, 4 years old. The chiefs are gone. The leaders are gone. The blacksmith is gone. The person that, cooks and cleans or whatever, that person is gone because they're ripe childbearing age. They're gone. So who are we left with? Who are we left with? Not much. So we had to endure, and we had to start over. I mean, just in Central Africa alone, close to 6 million people were taken just in Central Africa. That means Cameroon, Congo, Angola, right? Guinea. Just in Central Africa alone, 6 million people left. Just imagine that in America, there were only around 200,000 Africans that ended up in America, not the Americas, but in America. So the rest of them left. Imagine having villages completely wiped out. No history, no culture, no nothing. So we as Africans, first generation, we endured. We as Africans, first generation in America, endured. So there is a common ground between us. So we have to look at it as ground zero. When we talk about developing Africa, we have to look at it as ground zero. We have to bring our families home and make them feel like they're at home first, and then start talking about what can we do in our home. What do we do in our home? So as I do these tours to Cameroon, some of the most important things that we do is bring people to the villages, because the villages are where the culture still remains. One thing that's not mentioned is that there is development in Africa, but it's slow. And most, I wouldn't say most, but a lot of Africans feel that they have to leave the village because there are no jobs. So some villages end up being sort of ghost towns, right? So what we are saying in terms of, and I'm saying myself, in terms of cultural tourism, what we are saying is that we would love for Africans, especially Cameroonians, to continue to strengthen the cultural aspects of Cameroon within the context of the villages, because we understand that when development comes, we may not have those opportunities to visit those villages. And if our culture is in the village and not in towns like Yaoundé, Douala, some culture is in Douala, but I don't know how much culture is in Yaoundé. So if we are saying then that the culture is supported in the villages, we as Cameroonians need to make sure that the villages have the likelihood to survive, and we want to make sure that that culture lasts. Because as someone in the diaspora that may not be able to afford to travel to Cameroon for another 5-10 years, we want to make sure that when they're ready to travel to Cameroon, that there is that place that they can go to learn about the history and the culture and the tradition of their people. Where if they're Bamileke, if they're Tika, if they're Massa, if they're Mafa, we need to be able to take them there to those people, to talk to those elders who are the library of the village, so that we don't lose it as Cameroonian, we don't lose that culture, because we need to pass it on to the descendants of those who left our shores. Oftentimes, Africans, various countries will talk about, well, here is the place where they left. But there's no story about here is the story of what happened to them when they left. Do we know what happened on those ships? Do we know whether or not they even had air, clean air to breathe? Because some of the stories that happened on those ships that we heard were atrocious, piling up our ancestors one on top of each other because they needed to get them in those boats. And if one merchant had $500 and he needed to get the most number of enslaved Africans that he could, is he going to give them the space to walk around? No, he's going to make sure that they get in there no matter what he has to do. And some of you have seen those pictures of the slave ships and what they look like when they pile them up, 200, 300 of them at a time. It's not pretty. But what you don't know, and some of us Africans have to realize that that was just the beginning of the journey. If you made it to the shores and you made it on the plantations, and those things that happened on the plantations, that was just the beginning of the journey. It didn't end at the shores where they left. Really, it ends with their descendants coming back. Because the most important thing right now is that their descendants understand the journey of their ancestors, and they're coming back because they're reclaiming their heritage. Number one, the most important thing is understanding where your people come from and reclaiming your heritage. And like I said before, from there, anything can happen. You've got your ancestors' home, you're at your ancestors' home, you're with your cousins and your aunties, you're with your grandmother and your grandmother, you've talked to the elders, you know the customs of your people, you know the traditions of your people, And then CADIIF comes and says, okay, my brother, my sister, we're here together. Here's how we can move forward together. We do these tours so that people can learn about their people. We do these tours so that Africans in the diaspora can learn about the ancestry of their ancestors. But we also do the tours so that Africans can know more about the Africans in the diaspora who are coming on to do these tours, and don't look at them as American, as Jamaican, as Trinidadians, as Grenadians. Look at them first as Africans, second as Cameroonians. And when you start looking at them as Cameroonians and as Africans, the whole narrative changes, right? I am an African first and a Cameroonian second. I will always support Africa. I will always support the continent. Those are the most important things that we can learn from each other and acknowledge who we are as a family. My tours are done so that we connect, but also so that we can go back home with the knowledge that we've met people that look like our ancestors, look like Cousin Joe, look like, Cousin Trina. I don't know how many times I've heard on my tours, people walking down the street and somebody said to them, oh my goodness, you look just like my cousin, or you look just like my auntie. There's no greater compliment than to go to your hometown. And Jason Elong, who got an African name, a Bamileke name, Elong, I know you know what I'm talking about. I see you. But there's no greater joy than to get your African name and to get on the continent, in the city and the village that your ancestors come from, and see people that look just like your family. What's better than that? Please tell me. Because it comes full circle. They left, the ancestors left, went on the ship, ended up on the shores. The descendants did their DNA to find out where they came from, took a plane, went back, and ended up on the shores. Full circle. And I'm here to tell you that my work has started. It's not over. We still have a lot of work to do. As the professor says, an African name is the most important thing that an African can have. Without your African name, who are you truly? And what we are trying to do with the help of Mr. Calvin Pearson in Hampton, Virginia, and the 1619 Project is give back those names to the descendants so that they can take ownership and pride in who they are. I thank you so much for having me today. And I thank all of you that I've known forever and I've traveled with to Cameroon. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure to see all of you today. And I'm grateful that we are here today because of COVID. Otherwise, I'm sure we would be somewhere in Paris with this conference. And it's a pleasure to be here, right? Or in Cameroon. But it's an honor to be here, and I appreciate all of you. Leslie, I see you. Meredith, I see you. My sister, Candace, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Ada. Thank you for this additional insight, which enriches the story with other important elements to strengthen ties between Africans. No matter where they were born or lived, it's about consideration. Another generation of Africans is possible, one who sees itself as the descendants of the same strain. And that's what makes us strong and defines how we educate our children and all those things. So I keep in my mind that African descendants need a place to call home, a place that tells about what happened before they left. So continue to put your questions in the chat. So Roots to Glory Tours brings all Africans together as a family, also because the history of Africans did not begin when the colonizers drew the borders, but far longer before, at the founding of the world. Thank you, Ada, for this brilliant presentation. And now it's time for me to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Eric Chinje. And Eric Chinje is an influential Cameroonian journalist, and he was the first speaker for the TV news in English on the Cameroonian national TV about 30 years ago. And he's now the president of CORE Africa. So, Mr. Eric Chinje, you have the floor.
Okay. Okay. So we're ready. Thank you very much, Erika, and thanks everybody. I recognize quite a few names, and I'm happy you all are here. We've been asked to speak about what the expectations are on both sides. I suppose the reason I can speak to that is simply, I guess, because I've had participated in some of the journeys home. Home to Cameroon for the Camericans, those who've done the DNA test and traced their roots to Cameroon. I realize Lafayette has just joined, Curtis is on. Thank you all. So based on that experience, but more broadly, based on the experience of following the Africa story, as I have in various capacities. So I guess I could speak to that and at least open up an avenue for questions. I'd love to speak briefly and rather respond to questions. So let me start off with the bigger picture. Let me start with the Africa story. Because the question is, what are those expectations? But those expectations, we must insert them into that Africa story and take it from there. I'll ask the question, where is Africa and where is the continent going? And you may want to look at this from the perspective of the single country Cameroon, or look at it from the broader perspective of the entire continent. Because where we are and where we're going, these things are intricately linked. You may have heard about what's called the Continental Free Trade Area. The Continental Free Trade Area, the African Continental Free Trade Area. So as I'm concerned, this is possibly the biggest development on the continent since 1960. Or when I say 1960, because in 1963, to be exact, the Organization of African Unity, what eventually became the African Union, was created. The Organization of African Unity. This was a political attempt to bring Africa together, kind of the United States of Africa, this is hopefully going to lead to that. The African Union exists and continues to work for that continental unity. But something didn't happen in the process. Something did not happen in the process. Or the Africans were not sophisticated enough to know that your political union could not survive without an economic union. The one visionary who saw this, who understood it, and initiated the process towards this continental economic union was a guy called Kwame Nkrumah. And I'll urge you, if you can, to go to the African Union website, look for that speech that he delivered on the 24th of June, 1963, at the creation or the inception of the African Union. Dr. Kwame Nkrumah made it very clear in that speech that the union they were about to create would have no legs on which to walk if they were not solid, if it was not built on a solid economic foundation. So, but it's taken 60 years for Africans to recognize that. And in my view, I think we have. In my view, there's a greater awareness now of the importance of creating and distributing wealth in Africa. Of Africans coming together and ultimately asking themselves the question, what do we produce? What do we take to the market? How do we create wealth? How do we distribute wealth? For 60 years, and I say this from the experience of someone who has been a high-level official at the World Bank and the African Development Bank. We've never asked ourselves, how do we create and distribute wealth? So we have let the others, the so-called development partners, mostly from the West and in the last 10, 15 years from China, and increasingly now we're beginning to see the Russians and other players come into the picture. Even Brazil tried, but Brazil didn't send Afro-Brazilians. Brazil was coming with the Chamber of Commerce from Rio de Janeiro, which is essentially a white-owned enterprise. But all of these countries are now wanting to come in as players. And what they essentially did was create and enhance and tell us we could distribute poverty. So there's an awareness of the need for Africans to take over that process, for Africans to talk to each other, to work towards creating a common market. And if you create a market, you have to look at what you take to the market, what you bring to consumers. And if you're going to bring something to consumers, you've got to figure out how you produce, the quality of production, the cost of production, the technical capacity of production. So these are fundamental questions that Africans will have to answer, and I think there's a sudden awareness of the need to address that. Over the last 4 days, so from Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday till yesterday, a major conference has been taking place that has brought together an amazing range of people. We've never had this on the continent. But all of a sudden, we had heads of state, civil society leaders, business people, and all these administrative folks from regional organizations like the African Union, the ECA, and so on, Economic Commission for Africa. They're all coming together finally to talk about wealth creation on the continent, to talk about communicating Africa differently, to talk about what we can do as a people without being told by others. So there is some change in the air. There's something fundamental about to happen. And if I were to advise anybody, I would say now is the time. I came into this conference almost half an hour late because I had a family Zoom conference with my nieces and nephews and you name it, my brothers and my sisters. I've got 6 sisters and 2 brothers, and a plethora of young nephews and nieces. And we were talking about, and everyone was being challenged to talk about what you can do, what business you can pursue, what ideas you have. Because this is the time to position oneself. For a guy like me, I mean, I'm old and tired almost, but I still have the strength to push on. But I want to make sure that the younger ones know exactly what to do, and that they benefit from this. This is my long way around to telling you all that this is the time, whether it's in Cameroon or in Zimbabwe or South Africa or Uganda, wherever in Africa. We're getting to that time. And we've got to be ready. It's not going to be easy either. It's not going to be easy either, because I know I was seeing that in the conference that has taken place over the last 4 days, there are people from Norway who came in. There are people from the United States and other countries, China. They're signing in to hear what the Africans are finally telling themselves. And they will. You know, one sector, one major sector, which I'll allow myself to talk about, because it is ultimately going to determine whether we succeed or fail, is the maritime sector, what they call the blue economy. Are we going to figure out how to dominate that sector, or are we going to just put everything into ships that belong to China or Greece, take it to a market where we have other people determining what the ultimate price of our coffee and our cocoa and all of that stuff, what the ultimate price is in the international market. So Africans have to talk about the maritime economy. We have more maritime routes, more openings to the sea and rivers and lakes that connect us that we've not used. And we need to now think about that. And I mentioned this because this is one sector where the diaspora can come in. And there are many of them. This is clearly one sector where you can come. You can come in if you've developed some expertise in shipping and transportation by sea. It's a sector that needs everybody, you know, from folks who work with, you know, from doctors to engineers to craftsmen because the shipping sector is a world of its own, you know. So all kinds of expertise, technologies, and so on can support that and drive that sector. But there's a whole range when it comes to production, all kinds of, we need folks who have marketing skills. And believe me, in Africa, we'll listen to an American or someone who's got experience in America than to someone who's there in Africa. So this diaspora, whether it's folks like me who studied in the United States and can go and say, oh, I know the Americans. Probably find, if I were younger, I'd probably this would be the time to go to Africa and flaunt my skill. For all of you who were either born here or evolved here, now is the time for Africa differently and to be told by anybody else what that Africa is. Because they're finally coming to their own senses out there in Africa. It's not yet across the board. It is not yet that population of 1.3 billion people, almost the size of China and India. It's not yet. But a critical mass is developing that will move Africa in a different direction. I hope God hears me, but I think that's what I see happening. And if that can be buttressed by the expertise and the skills that all of us can pull together and take to that continent, I think we'll be supporting change like it has never happened. And I think this ultimately was God's reason for allowing the trade in the enslavement of people to happen, so that Africans can find themselves everywhere across the world, understand what's going on, understand the technologies that operate, the marketing systems, the financial structures, and bring that to this continent when it is needed. And something in me tells me this is the time. I think about the Jewish diaspora that you all know. We all know about the Jewish diaspora. Israel will not be Israel today without that Jewish diaspora. There were a lot of very poor people in Israel living in Palestine, as it was before 1948. There are lots of very poor people, Jewish. But as soon as independence was declared and Jews from around the world could go and settle in Israel, what is Israel today? What did they do? They brought money, technologies, understandings of how the world works, diplomacy, communications, all of that. And Israel is what it is today. They're leading the world in dealing with COVID, for example. They're turning the desert green, for example. I mean, they're doing something. I don't know if there are any Jews amongst us, but what they're doing to Palestine, I will allow myself to say that. They will be punished for that. They should not be doing what they're doing. I digress, and I'm sorry. My point is to say that, to answer that question, what do you have a right to expect? Going back to Cameroon, going back to Africa. And I'm saying the timing could not be better. This is it. Let's go and support this new energy that we're seeing emerging from the ground up. Think about what you can bring into that argument. And we're talking about developing a continent. There's so much to be done. There's so much to be done. You'd be amazed at how small ideas can germinate and transform a nation, a people, a city, a village. You'd be amazed. And this is the time to do it. COVID has taught us one thing. I'm sure you all know this. It was seen in the international development community, in which I belong, as another reason to indebt Africa again. Everywhere they were saying, oh, we need to mobilize money to help Africa. Let's mobilize money and help Africa. What they were not saying is, let's indebt Africa further. That's why I say these international organizations, all they do is hawk poverty. The hawkers of poverty. So they're looking at the pandemic, COVID-19, and saying, another wonderful opportunity. Let's mobilize the funds, give them the impression we're helping take care of them. And before they know it, we're declaring the debt they owe. And they have to keep paying. That's where they want us to be. And why, you would understand why I think God is stepping in. Africa is the least affected by COVID. But it's not only that. It's not only that. We are now wondering if it is the food we eat. If in our ginger, jangsa, eru, these are all condiments and vegetables that almost, even the poorest homes on the continent will have in their cuisine. Is that what has somehow protected the vast majority of Africans from the pangs of the pandemic? Maybe. But there's a revisiting of what it is Africa produces, what we can extract from that continent. And if we don't hurry to do it, they will do it. And before you know it, they're exporting our mangoes, mango leaves. They're exporting our cassava leaves. They're exporting our eru, our andole, you name it. Before you know it, they're exporting it to the rest of the world because there's something in those vegetables and tubers and so on. There's something that has helped the continent. You cannot say it's because they're Black people in the majority in Africa. No, because Black people in America were dying from COVID. So there's something out there. And the non-African world is active, is busy looking into that to figure out what it is. Then before we know it, of course, they're exploiting it and selling it to us and ensuring that we are in more debt so we can continue to sell poverty and nothing else. So I'll end here by saying this. There is a drive to finally reposition Africa in the global scheme of things. That drive is on. And in the months ahead, in the years ahead, I am convinced you will see from wherever you sit or stand that something almost spiritual as slavery was, is about to happen. And you want to position yourself for that. If you're a Cameroon, American of Cameroonian origin, it is time to prepare yourself. If you're as old as I am, there's a lot of things you can bring to the table. And you can make sure that our children come to the table. That's what you have a right to expect. And it's in all fields of activity. It is in all fields of activity. Let us join hands and not have this window of opportunity close on us. I think we can do it. I hope we will through CADIIF and the other initiatives, ADA's initiative, and so on. Let's come together and do it. And we'll be proud to tell God when we meet with him that we now understand what you did. And this is what we brought to the table. This was my role in it. That's what I want to be able to say. And I hope you too will want to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for what what you say that resonates in my mind as wisdom. Yes, and I would like to share my screen to show you something. Do you see my screen?
Yes, Erika.
Okay, thank you. So this, you have to see it as a message from Cameroon's sons and daughters addressed to the land of their ancestors. And it tells us our common story. We are all the sons of the same land. And today, in 2021, we realize that we cannot go anywhere, any further if we stay apart. We have been listening for those presentations, and the three of them were so inspiring because it took us a long time to understand and to learn that we cannot go anywhere if we stay apart. Here is what we know from today on. Time has passed. We have been battered on both sides of history. We weren't used to complaining, and I'm using the we the same way as Ada did, because it's about that. We suffered. You, the land of our ancestors, you tried to protect us as you could from torture and inhuman and degrading treatment. We resisted as we could, some even going so far as to commit suicide. You fought for us 400 years ago. You fought for us 80 years ago. And you're still fighting for us today in your own way. We have shown resilience. We are those who never give up. We are those who are paving the way through history for other people. The land of our ancestors. This land is so blessed. So as Eric said, we have to take action now. The history we have been so wounded by history that there is a time when we have to say enough is enough. So many people after slavery went abroad. Is another diaspora, is another time, but it's also because of the strength 400 years ago, as Professor Ahmadou said, but it's about knowledge today. Our land is not as it should be. So we have to give respect to those moments by taking action, by taking our responsibility towards history. You know, Black Lives Matter movement is also here. And I agree, God is stepping in because there are signs that don't lie. With soccer, with music, we know Cameroon. Passion and resilience are your brand. Why excellent? Your children, talented people, with your DNA, we're coming from the same land. So we, for our children, for their children, for the children of their children, we have to create ourselves the conditions of our return. Nobody will do it for us. This land is so blessed, but what happened? Once we have finished to cry, comes the time to act. And now today is the time to act. This is the new beginning. Together, history taught us that we can achieve anything when we put our hearts and our strengths together. You are listening to me. And I will be proud if I could see each of you stepping back home for good. And it's possible. And here is the platform for that today. There is no other goal for us. We will not end unless we are sure, we are certain that our children will be able to get back home if they want. And we are going to make it come true. And that's the challenge of our generation. And that's the reason we invited you today here. CADIIF is a Cameroonian Diaspora Investment Fund and Foundation. And its major challenge for our country remains the creation of the condition for true industrialization. We want to contribute with local development actors, and that's what I'm going to present you. This is to promote the return to the homeland, as we love our country and it deserves us to be back. So we want to manufacture in Cameroon and turn around companies that can manufacture in quantity and quality, accompany innovation, acquire interest in strategic sectors, and integrate in a technical and managerial way the skills of the diaspora. We are private, non-political, and we are bringing together Cameroonians from abroad concerned about the development of Cameroon and ready to pool the resources, the expertise, the skills serving Cameroon. The return of skills and expertise in the context of a stable and decent jobs for all of us to return to the homeland. We want to be back to the homeland. And we have conducted incentive projects. We propose for investment as a technopole, and that will be the topic of our next webinar in 2 weeks. And as promoting medical plants, investment bank, fish and shellfish, so many items, pools that we can put on the table to make it work. So that is it. We know that excellence is our brand. And we know that we cannot make it if we don't put our strengths together. So among the projects, there are specifically 2 that I'm going to present about slavery. There are places of pilgrimage in Cameroon. We want to build and organize a historical village dedicated to welcoming and hosting Cameroonians or African Americans or Africans in general who have come to revive, to know, to learn, and to live with their families, to acquire better knowledge of these dark periods in history, their history. So we want to propose to them the Return to the Homeland trip program and to build a modern tourist site, but faithful and respectful of the historic places that could attract 400,000 to 500,000 visitors per year, mainly, and over the next 10 years. So we could create stable jobs for diaspora leaders with the right skills in the fields and vocation to return. So this historical village will have around a museum and a large library retracing the known and to be known history of the slave trade, and will also offer a modern and traditional convenience, contributing to make this return to the native land a warm and unforgettable journey. So this project will make our history visible. It will make it greater because people will know, people will come, people will learn. And for that to become true, we also propose, we're offering another project that is a doctoral school, because to make a history widely known, we have to continue researches on the historical values, the historical meanings, the historical facts. And it doesn't work if we have not scientific view of that. And Professor Ahmadou told us about that. It's important to keep searching about what happened. So we will also get in partnership with the National University, a doctoral school dedicated to studies around the history of slavery in Cameroon. And to ensure that students will become part of that and they will push for their career in business, administration, higher education, or public or private scientific research. So this vocation is to work in applied research for all areas that can provide scientific truth about slavery and about its consequences in Cameroon. So it is open to all students from the fields of history of slavery, geostrategy, sociology, economics, finance, as well as from other fields whose research results can uncover the truth. So that's what we have in mind, and that's what we have as our goal, our main goal in CADIIF. We hope that you will be part of that journey, the new journey, because we know that there is no better moment than now. We know that if we don't step forward now, probably we will not have any occasion again to make it work. So thank you for listening. We're going to take the questions. Thank you for all.
So somebody had a question about availability of the recording. Is that going to be available so we can
Yes.
share? Okay.
Sure, yes.
The first question was addressing Professor Sehou. So fortunately, I translated it in French already, so I will endeavor to read it in English fresh.
Yes.
So, Professor, you mentioned the fact that the best slaves were taken to the Western world, which is pretty obvious. Now, their descendants have been stripped of the opportunities of success after the emancipation. Well, I want to find out what is the purpose of your organization and how can African Americans collaborate with the Americans that are in the diaspora, in the US, sorry. That is the first question. I might have not accurately translated it because I wrote it in French. I had to read it in English again.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's for Professors Ahmadou?
Yes. Yes.
Professeur, est-ce que vous voudrez qu'on traduise la question en français?
Oui, ce serait mieux pour mieux comprendre.
D'accord. L'intervenante dit que vous avez fait mention du fait que les meilleurs esclaves, les meilleurs de nos ancêtres ont été déportés vers l'Occident, ce qui est plutôt évident, et que les descendants auraient été privés de ce privilège-là, du fait que les meilleurs de nos ancêtres ont été déportés vers l'Europe durant la traite des esclaves. Alors, elle aimerait savoir, il ou elle aimerait savoir quel est le but de notre organisation et comment est-ce qu'une éventuelle collaboration entre les Africains de la diaspora et les Africains, les Afro-Américains pourrait se passer. Pourrait-il avoir une éventuelle collaboration entre les deux? Si oui, comment?
Ok, merci. Ça, c'est pour l'organisation, c'est Erika.
Probablement.
So Erika will answer what concerns the organization. But what I want to put clear is that I said that the best of Africans, yes, is to know that they have not taken any Africans. They have made choice. They have not taken all Africans. They have not taken babies, but they have chosen between young men, young girls, persons with technical knowledge, and you can understand all what they have done in terms of works in the mining, in the farmers, and so on, in plantations, in the other side. And I could add also, they have taken the best of Africans, but those who come to Africa or went to America, or those who are colonizers, were the worst of Europe. If you go to read about the travels which led to slavery, those with Henri le Navigateur in Portugal, with Christophe Colomb, with Magellan, with Nino Tristão, and so on. The members of their ships are constituted of criminals, prostitutes. So peoples who are not desired in Europe, it is them who went abroad. Whether they die, it is not a problem. They became rich there. They are very far away from Europe. And what is done? So, and in the period of colonization, whether in the missionary or administrators, in the missionary personnel, you have many who discover the Bible in disembarking in Africa. We have names of clergymen who became bishops in Cameroon. They discover the Bible in Douala while disembarking. So you can understand the brutality of the system, the mechanism of the system, the functioning of the system. And what came back to Europe is the best of Africans. They have taken the best children of Africans to go to work in Americas. They take back products of the plantation. You have cities, ports in Europe who specialize in sewing and so on. Oxford, Liverpool, Manchester, very, very big world textile centers in the world. But you cannot have cotton in England. So you could understand the system. And I said that it is continuing. The best banana produced in Cameroon is for European markets. It's not for Cameroonian. The resources of the soil, the wood, timber were exploited. I said that our economies are based on products that cannot count for our daily life. If there is no cocoa, if there is no coffee, is it a problem in Cameroon? But the economy of Cameroon is based on those crops, foreign crops, cotton, cocoa, coffee. And you have the other one, you can add petrol, timber. If there is no coffee in the market in Cameroon, it cannot, it is make no problem for anyone. If there is no cocoa and no chocolate in the market in Cameroon, there is no problem for no one. But if it is the case in Europe, if you cannot have cocoa, you have not have chocolate, if you cannot have banana, you cannot have coffee, you are in trouble. So the system is built in those bases, and they are continuing. Who are Africans which are abroad? Who are Africans who are migrants? But it is mostly the best of Africans, best scholar, best doctors, best technicians. You have that DV lottery. You put all your pedigree and they choose you for your qualities, for your qualifications. The system is continuing. So with that globalization, what we face, all our crops can move easily, but person cannot move. You have passport, you have barriers, you have walls, electrified walls in the frontiers. But all goods can circulate, can go, and in the one side, all what we have, the most important we have is going abroad.
Yes.
Without any transforming in our system, without any engineering in our system. And by so doing, we are exporting all we have the best and all our jobs. Is why I concluded by saying we are developing poverty. And Eric have said the same. So we have to think about that. Is why I say they have taken the best of all, the best of Africans, they are continuing to take, and they send us the worst of Europe.
Thank you, Professor.
And the worst of the Western civilization. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. And can I reply to answer the second part of the question?
Yeah.
Yannick, c'était quels sont les objectifs du CADIIF? What are the objectives of your organization in regards to a positive collaboration between African Americans and African diaspora living in the US, for instance?
Right.
Yes. Okay, j'ai retrouvé la question. I want to say that CADIIF is the goal, the aim, the soul of the CADIIF is to bring Africans back home. is to bring all the descendants back home by all means. And we are not really turning our action into the US concerns themselves. So we want to open a new view of Africa and how all descendants can live in Africa together, open a new way of living, open a new way of imagining our future, because we have all been attracted by Western countries. And now it's time to get back to the basis. Black Lives Matter make us realize that even if we're giving our best, we will never be considered as part of those nations, of those lands.
Erika.
Yes.
I just want to add, and I think it's important, that, and we have to discuss this maybe within CADIIF. We're not talking, I'm not sure we're talking about a mass transportation of people from the West back to Africa. We're talking about making a life in Africa, creating wealth in Africa, so folks who live here and have and can contribute to that wealth creation in Africa, that the folks here know they can come and make money in Africa. They can come and invest and make money. And if we, in doing that, we turn the African story around, if in doing that, we turn that story around, look, they will find their places here as anywhere else in the world. The Jews in America, because of the Jews in America, nobody fools around with Israel. Nobody fools around with Israel. So if we can get to that place where the African Americans, the Cameroons, the whatever, you know, if we can get to that place where, because of the wealth they've helped in creating out there, because they have a place they can go to if anything were to go wrong here, if we can get to that place with Africa, we'll change the history of the world. Yes. So I think we're really talking about looking for opportunities of investment. We're talking about looking for opportunities to contribute technologically, financially, architecturally, you name it. We're looking for those opportunities for people to bring their knowledge and expertise and whatever they have to Africa and be a part of that African reality. And then earn the respect here. There will no longer be talk about Black Lives Matter. If every Black person has an investment and a place in Africa, that's what we're talking about. And I think we can make it happen.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question.
All right, we can proceed with the second question. These questions addresses the professor. So, Professor, the questions is, what arguments, let me just cut it short. What arguments supports the assertions that there was no slavery before the arrival of Islam and Portuguese? That's the first one. And he says, how sure, since written sources are very limited, how sure are you about the accuracy of the oral traditions that you rely on? So, Professor, I can translate it in French for you. I've written it down. En fait, la question c'est, quel est l'argument qui soutient la théorie selon laquelle il n'y avait pas d'esclavage avant l'arrivée de l'islam et des Portugais? Dans un contexte où les sources écrites sont limitées, comment saviez-vous que vos assertions sont correctes? Comment pouvez-vous vérifier que vos assertions sont correctes? Et êtes-vous sûr de la précision et la fiabilité des traditions orales sur lesquelles vous vous rabattez ou bien sur lesquelles vous vous basez? Telle est la deuxième question qui vous est totalement adressée. professeur.
Merci. Si je peux répondre directement, je commence en français. Je veux dire que dans le contexte africain, les sociétés africaines, n'est-ce pas, avant l'islam, avant l'arrivée des Portugais sur la côte, si nous prenons l'espace camerounais qui nous concerne, c'était toutes des sociétés claniques, c'est-à-dire des sociétés fondées sur les lignage, sur des sortes de grandes familles. Il n'y avait pas de société centralisée, des sociétés militarisées. Les Douala, c'était des pêcheurs le long du Vouri là. Et vous pouvez élargir ça à tous les peuples qui sont sur la côte là. Les Bassa, les Bakoko, les Banen, à l'intérieur, si vous voulez. Donc, et dans la partie des Grassfields, vous avez un peuplement qui vient de la Damawa, qui va progressivement vers ces hautes terres, avec les Tikars, parce que tous sont descendants des Tikars, que ce soit les Bamoun et autres. Les Bamoun, c'est avec l'islamisation, n'est-ce pas, qu'il y a eu ce renforcement de la chefferie Bamoun et son extension. Et ceux qui ont même initié, appris l'esclavage au Bamoun, c'est le Lamida de Bagnon, qui est un Lamida d'essence ou d'obédience musulmane. Et même en Afrique, si vous rentrez dans les siècles plus reculés, allez même dans l'Antiquité, en Égypte ancienne, ceux qui ont construit les pyramides, ce n'étaient pas des esclaves. Il n'y avait pas de marché d'esclaves en Égypte. Dans toutes nos sociétés là cherchées, avant l'introduction de l'islam par le nord ou bien du christianisme et la traite par le sud, il n'y avait pas de marché d'esclaves. On ne vendait pas.
Yannick va peut-être traduire cette portion.
Oui, vraiment, je n'ai pas voulu interrompre le professeur parce qu'en même temps, c'était très intéressant de vous écouter. Seulement que vous allez devoir réduire un peu afin que je puisse traduire à l'audience et revenir vers vous. Ce serait mieux. Sinon, dans la foulée, je pourrais oublier.
OK.
D'accord.
Allez-y sur ce que vous pouvez et puis après.
D'accord. Si vous pouvez vous répéter rapidement, je vous en prie.
Donc, j'ai dit que en Égypte ancienne, si on prend le cas de l'Égypte, les bâtisseurs des pyramides n'étaient pas des esclaves.
Oui. All right. So, I want to quickly answer to the questions, the professor's questions. Since he's taking a long development, we had to cut it short so that I can follow up the line of what he says. So, he's quoting the example of Egypt. He says, in the ancient Egypt, before the pyramid builders, there was no slave trade market. Let's just quote the example of the ancient Egypt. Before the pyramid builders, there was no slave trade market. Professeur, je vous en prie.
Oui. Et dans les autres sociétés, in other Cameroon societies, you have societies based of linkage. You didn't have chiefdoms, very powerful, militarized, which can go to big wars and make captives. You cannot find, before introduction of Islam by the north and the arrival of the Portuguese by the south in the coastal areas, you cannot have slave markets. It does not exist. And at the beginning of my presentation, I present the situation in Cameroon, the societies, how are they organized, what are the main activities, what is the everyday life. So no slavery like such what we are going to experience in the centuries after the introduction of Islam in the north and in the south by the coming of the Portuguese. It's what I put out. The question of sources, yes, when you talk about oral tradition is for the recent times. You cannot go very further by the oral traditions. But when the colonizers, when they arrive, there are archives they collect some traditions. And in those archives, you cannot find information related to slave markets in different African societies. But with Islam, you have the demand in the north to the Middle East. With Portuguese, in the coastal areas of Africa, you have the demand at the beginning to Europe, to Spain, to Portugal. It begins like that because they discover for the first time the black people. They took some specimens, they brought back to Spain and to Portugal. It is how the system began. They began to use them in the islands near the coastal areas of Africa as farmers, because you know that the conditions of navigation and those it made long times in years to go to one point to the other. So they have to renew their provisions. They have to renew water, crops, and so on to eat. And they start farming in the islands. And it is where they have started before what is called discovering of America by Christophe Colomb after 1492 and so on. How can he discover a land which is so populated with various peoples coming and traveling and going so far? So the system has been built progressively to satisfy a demand, whether coming from the Middle East or from the Atlantic, from Europe. Europe need sugar, Europe need cotton, Europe need coffee, and Europe use those people to produce all those crops.
Thank you, Professor.
The same ship which carry slaves to return back to Europe take crops from Americas.
Thanks, Professor.
So I think the third question, it could be for you, Erika. Is how can you return back to a continent whereby the politicians are quite unaware about our issues and the stakes? What will Cameroon do about the citizenship of the diaspora members? Je pense que si j'ai besoin de traduire, ou bien tu l'as saisi, en traduisant justement.
J'ai saisi, mais tu pourras traduire ma réponse, s'il te plaît.
D'accord, pas de problème.
Alors en deux volets. Pour répondre, le premier volet, c'est que le CADIIF, c'est une organisation donc apolitique par choix. Donc, nous ne nous mettons pas dans les affaires politiques et nous n'interférons pas dans les lois des pays. Voilà.
Yes. All right. Devrais-je traduire une fois?
Oui, s'il te plaît.
All right. To answer to the questions that was asked, the third questions, CADIIF is not a political organization. We are not tampering nor meddling with any political stake. We are an apolitical organization that seeks to gather the diasporans in order of industrializing our country. Erika, you have the floor.
Merci. Et le deuxième volet, comment on peut industrialiser le Cameroun? On a noté que la puissance, en fait, la force de frappe des Camerounais est dans leur dynamisme économique. Donc, c'est vrai que c'est un paradoxe, mais on voit bien que même si au niveau politique, les choses ne vont pas bien, au niveau économique, les Camerounais sont dynamiques et les chiffres montrent bien la puissance de la diaspora camerounaise dans l'envoi de fonds tous les ans au Cameroun. Donc, c'est ce pan-là que le CADIIF veut encadrer, cette puissance économique qui se manifeste par des actions individuelles qu'on veut démultiplier en rassemblant les énergies.
All right. So the purpose of CADIIF is to industrialize Cameroon in order of stepping up the self-reliance policy. Although we might not have any political power, economically speaking, we can do something for our country. You just have to take the figures coming from the remittances that are sent every day to our relatives in the country from the diaspora. It's pretty huge and makes a lot of money. So if we can't really be impactful, politically speaking, with our economy, we can help stepping up the self-reliance policy, not depending on the Europe anymore, and also build our country by industrializing it and creating more companies, which could eventually bring back the diaspora and be a sort of counterweight against the political power. Erika.
It's okay.
Je peux ajouter, I could add two things. First thing, that diaspora is considered as a region of Africa by African Union. First step, and it is a statutory. The diaspora is recognized as a region of Africa. Second, in Cameroon, the matter of the question of citizenship, there are long discussions undergoing about giving a double or triple nationality to Cameroonians abroad. And I think that when it will be when the problem will be solved, it can help. You can be American and Cameroonian at the same time. You can be you can have any foreign nationality and be Cameroonian. The only problem of the actual government with the diaspora, you can understand it in the context of accessing to independence in the 1960s, because you have those who fought for independence in the UPC, Union des Populations du Cameroun, and those who gain power at the independence are those who have not fought for the power.
Okay. So that's the 6 questions that we'll be addressing now. Okay. So, I mean, I will just sum it up. The person says that the attendees ask the question to know, in the largest organizations in the world, we see Cameroonians occupying high positions everywhere. We see Africans generally and particularly Cameroonians. How do we ensure that all those brains are brought back to the country? How can we ensure that there is no longer brain drain at the expense of our country? Alors, elle pose la question de savoir, dans toutes les grandes entreprises dans le monde et toutes les grandes structures dans le monde, nous voyons des Africains en général et particulièrement des Camerounais. Alors, comment faire? Comment pourrons-nous nous assurer qu'il n'y ait plus de fuite de cerveau, comme on le dit souvent, d'Europe, je vais dire du Cameroun particulièrement pour l'Afrique, ou alors comment faire en sorte que ces intelligences-là nous reviennent, nous Camerounais, en vue de développer notre pays?
Je pense que cette question fait appel à ce que Eric disait tout à l'heure. C'est de pouvoir à une plateforme, à un environnement propice à l'expression de ces intelligences-là. Donc,
yeah, I didn't hear you, Erika.
Yes, et la question
oui,
disait...
Enfin, j'ai pas compris. Oui.
Okay, there was a question about how are you doing it? Because we see Cameroonians in high positions all around the world, and how can we do to make them come back and develop the country? Et je disais que ça se rapproche de ce que toi tu disais, dans le sens où si nous ne fournissons pas une plateforme d'expression à ces intelligences-là sur place, au Cameroun, Mais les intelligences trouveront toujours un moyen de se faire valoriser ailleurs. Et c'est donc en industrialisant, en investissant massivement, en ramenant justement les challenges de développement au niveau local, au niveau national, que ces intelligences pourront trouver un terrain pour se développer et pour produire à destination du pays, au bénéfice même des Camerounais.
J'imagine que la personne qui a posé la question, il l'a fait en français, donc je vais...
Non, c'est en anglais.
Oh, okay, great. You know, we have to, we've projected a future. We've projected, we've talked about the direction things are beginning to take. And I insist on that fact. They're beginning to take. There's still a lot of work to do at all levels, at organizing society, at the governance level, at the financial, restructuring global finance to even begin to support these things. What I can say is that a lot of Cameroonians, a lot of Africans in positions of responsibility around the world, I don't know of any country where their diaspora, so the recent diaspora, where the folks who are in positions of leadership around the world are not going back to reinvest in their countries of origin. All the Africans, I mean, and there's so many, if we talk about Cameroon alone, there are so many from Cameroon in institutions like the United Nations, the World Bank, the IMF, the African Development Bank, the ECA, and so on. A lot of Cameroonians, they are all looking at opportunities for investment in the country. I happen to know this. But there's a serious problem also. And this is what we will need to focus on. There's a real governance challenge in the country. There is a challenge of governance on the continent. So these things are real.
Thank you.
But we're beginning to see this is where the AU is leading this action that will hopefully result in an improved investment climate in Africa. This is what's happening. And everybody, including Cameroon, is a part of it. So two things. One, the Cameroonian diaspora, like the African diaspora, just about everybody I know in a position of responsibility is working to do something for their country. Secondly, at a continental level, there's this consciousness that we've got to create wealth in Africa. And it takes for certain conditions for wealth to be created. And people are beginning to address that. So that's where we are. I'm very hopeful.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric.
You're welcome.
Last question. I think this question could address Ada.
The next question.
So, how can you organize the return of Cameroons without having any accurate localizations of their relatives? Do you compare the DNA with Cameroonians? That's the question. So, Ada, probably. So, comment pourriez-vous organiser le retour des Camerounais, des Caméricains, sans avoir une connaissance précise de leurs proches, c'est-à-dire de qui sont leurs proches? Faites-vous une comparaison des ADN entre Camerounais? Donc, voilà la dernière question qui s'adresse probablement à Ida. Probablement, Erika pourra, si éventuellement elle a quelque chose à dire, elle ajoutera.
Non, c'est Ada. C'est vraiment dans le domaine de Ada. Parce que les voyages retour, c'est Roots to Glory. Et Ada? Est-ce qu'on peut Ouvrir son micro.
Oui, this is what I'm trying to do, but she's not activating. So I'm not sure she's here.
Okay, we're going to listen to Daniel's question. I think you had something to say, Danielle, and when she's back, we're going to let her answer.
Hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. No, I wanted to comment on the last question. It talked about how do we, I guess in a nutshell, how do we encourage those folks to go back, right? And I think that's what CADIIF is all about. 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, the World Bank started to recognize and track the foreign remittances by the diaspora. They were trying to figure out how does the World Bank, and Eric, you can speak to this, how does the World Bank leverage this money that is going back to a lot of these countries, these African countries? And what they realized was, if I'm Cameroonian and I have a friend who's Central African, regardless of what is happening in that country, if there's a war, if there's a instability, they're finding a way to go back and invest, whether it's building a home, sending money for family members. And so the bank was like, how do we leverage that and create an institution around it that will support those remittances to get that money through and back for projects that are larger than just building a home? And so I think that when we talk about how do we encourage people to go back, it's really about opportunities and creating opportunities. But more importantly, what CADIIF is trying to do is to go from your individual investors to institutional investors and pooling a group of people who are like-minded and developing projects which can be collaboratively invested in at a larger scale. And so, and that's something that I find very interesting. And I think that that's the approach that would encourage me to go back, to Cameroon, where I'm from, and really look at other opportunities in that way. So I think it's based on creating opportunities and streamlining the process for people to invest is what's really going to encourage people to go back home.
Exactly. Thank you, Daniel. It's exactly the point and the purpose of our mission here. Is there any other question, Barrister?
No, Erika, no more questions.
Okay. Oh, okay. So we're going to conclude here. Ada, is Ada back or not?
No.
I'm here. Sorry.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Ada. There was a question for you here.
Okay.
Please, Barrister.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. The question was, how can you organize the returns of the Americans without any accurate knowledge about the localization of their siblings? Do you compare DNAs with Cameroonians? That's the question.
We're talking in terms of the tours, right?
Pardon?
We're talking in terms of the tours.
Yes, the tours and yes, people with DNA, yes.
And so here's what I want to say is that, and the professor can collaborate. First of all, most Africans are related to each other. There is a DNA that is connected to a lot of us, right? Cameroonians, if you're Cameroonian, you're Cameroonian. If your DNA is from Cameroon, it's from Cameroon. There are certain DNA companies that can tell you who your match is, and there are others that are not able to tell you your match. So we've actually had people that came from Cameroon who their DNA was Cameroonian, and we were able to match them with DNA from Cameroon and take them to meet their DNA cousins, relatives. So, and that is the Tikar, the Bamileke, the Bamoun. So we were able to do that using DNA knowledge and DNA kits, especially from Ancestry.com. So yes, there is a way to do that. But more importantly, I feel that when you're Cameroonian, and it doesn't matter which village you go to, you're going to learn Cameroonian culture and traditions.
Thank you, Ada.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. That's okay. Yannick, is there another question?
Well,
we are done?
Yes,
No.
someone was asking if we can define the goals of our organizations on the live chat.
And it has been done. It has been done. Yes.
All right. Another person says that she takes back her DNA to Massa. And since then, she's been trying to learn some French. And she was told that, yes, Massa is from Yagua region. I believe it's not a region, it might be probably a division in Cameroon. So she was trying to find out if she can get more information about it. And since then, she's been trying to learn some French. So can she get, she was told that she's from the Yagua region, which I believe is a department, is a division, not a region. Wanted to find out if someone can get more information about that precise area of Cameroon.
Okay, I can tell about French, but only about French.
Yagua is a part of the Fano region of Cameroon. Cette partie-là qu'on appelle le bec de canard, c'est là où se trouve Yagua. Donc, il y a les familles Massa et maintenant, on peut, si la personne veut aller, elle peut facilement s'y rendre. Donc, la route est bonne et elle sera reçue.
All right. So, to answer the questions, the professor says that Yagua is located in the northern part of Cameroon, and it's easier to get there. If you want to get there, the people are pretty welcome.
So thank you for attending this webinar. It's been a pleasure for us, and the next step will be another webinar on the Technopole that will take place in 2 weeks. So we hope you will be part of that one. It's a project that is about technological development of Cameroon. And you can continue to send us questions on our platforms online, our Facebook, our Instagram, our Twitter. We will give you the answers you're expecting. Thank you, everyone, and have a good weekend.